Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to interview your customers and how to use that sales messaging into not only sales messaging and prospecting, but on how to actually understand what resonates or doesn't with your prospects. I speak about that a lot on LinkedIn, but I always feel that the posts are too short to explain such a complex, or not complex, but long process. So here you go. That's what this video is for. So usually either with my customers or when I work in companies as a head of a revenue department, this is usually my plan. And I will go through it throughout this presentation using a real world example. So I start by interviewing the customers. Then in the interviews, I really go deep onto pains, KPIs, triggers, USPs. Then I use that data into writing outbound messaging and also to formulate hypotheses. Then my teams go on the battlefield and they test the messaging and the hypothesis. So we discover what works and double down and what we should abandon and why. So this is basically the plan that we will go through today. So I usually interview for half an hour. If you can get more time with your customer, awesome. But they are usually very busy people, so I'm okay with half an hour if it's all I got. I always ask about their day to day, their challenges and priorities, if they changed from last year. Super important information, not only for your sales messaging, but also for your marketing, for your product development. Which KPIs keep them awake at night? What were the challenges they had before working with us? How did we solve them? What were the results? And then more generic, what do they value in tools? How do they like to communicate? How do they look for new tools? And then super important, so even if I would only have 5 minutes with my customers, these are the two questions that I would never leave the meeting without asking. The first one is, what led them to our solution, in the sense of when did they start feeling the pain we solved, aka event or trigger. And then, okay, they felt the pain, they were looking for a provider, then they chose us instead of the competition. Why is that? Why us and not the others? So what are our USPs that the client value? Not that what we value, but our clients. And then after that, I have enough information to start drawing my hypothesis. So I'm going to give you an example for a cloud company. So the service was cloud. The buyer persona was a CTO in FinTech, in the SMB size of company in Europe. Okay. So super important to define your ICP and buyer persona. So I interviewed a couple of CTOs in the FinTech industry in small and medium companies in Europe. And I tried to understand what were their challenges, and then before they're working with us, results after working with us, which KPIs are important to them, which USPs did they find relevant in our product, and what led them, when did they start feeling the pain. So after I interviewed a couple of customers, I found out that most of them were in bare metal, on premise, if you like. And so when you work on prem or with bare metal servers, it's really hard to scale up and down according to the traffic, right? It's also complex to maintain this physical servers, so it started to add a lot of workload and it was too rigid. So they were looking for a cloud provider that was able to scale up and down the resources according to their needs, obviously with a good speed so they could process data, enhance connectivity, and predictable pricing. And for them, and we will talk about it in the USP part, predictable pricing was very important because cloud costs can escalate very quickly. And sometimes it's quite a surprise when you get your invoice in the end of the month. So predictable pricing is indeed a good result, a good USP. Then for the CTOs, what kept them up at night? Speed, stability, scale. Basically, whether your website and app is working, is on all the time, and it's fast enough so you don't abandon it, right? So that's super important, and that's why it's also important that the cloud provider can support that. So what made us different at the time? Fast IO speed, but affordable and predictable pricing for the reasons that I already mentioned. And something that some of them also mentioned, they really like the fact that they feel they're just paying for what they need, and they didn't feel that we were adding features and add-ons to make the price higher that they didn't really need. So they really appreciate that in the offering. Then, in terms of triggers, when they needed to start scaling up and down when they started growing the company, when they felt that the bare metal service were too rigid. And super interesting, something I found out while I was interviewing them in September 2024, and then the following January, on the 17th in 2025, there was a new legislation for fintech, banking, insurance companies in Europe called DORA, and they had to be compliant. And that also meant that the cloud provider had to be DORA compliant. So some of our customers also looked for us because of that. So some of them, they were already on cloud, right? So they didn't come from prem to cloud. They already had another cloud provider, but they switched to us because we were compliant to DORA. All right, so we have the elements. Here we go. So a lot of messaging elements that I'm going to use are triggers like growth and bare metal service being rigid and DORA for triggers, predictable pricing, affordability, fast IO, no vendor logging flexibility for USPs, and then KPIs that are important: speed, stability, scale. Those are the messaging elements that we can use to messaging. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much has the added workload from DORA compliance impacted your already busy schedule? And here is super important. As you can see, is this added workload was some expression that I took from the customer interview. And it's something that when you interview the customer, you have to go deeper on their priorities and challenges. Even if you ask, let's say, stupid questions. For example, if a CTO tells me that DORA compliance is annoying, I should ask the follow-up question, why is that annoying? And I already have a busy schedule and now I have an added workload because of some sort of legislation. So it's important that you also not only understand the challenges, but you hear how they speak about them and which language they use, so you can reproduce that on a messaging that resonates more with your prospect. So that's what I did here in this message and in the following ones. Another example of messaging: hey, your company has grown by X. Curious if you're having challenges in scaling computational power to handle fluctuating demands. You can scale effortlessly without the usual hardware complexities. So in this, another email with the elements that I took away from the customer interview. Same here. In terms of scalability, a KPI that's important for the CTO. Besides scalability, one of the companies we worked with had significant data processing requirements, and their biggest pain was input-output speed. After switching to us, that got better. So here is very focused on their KPIs. Here, focused on the USP that apparently was very important for them, which was predictable pricing. So while a surprise birthday party might be fun, unexpected cloud costs definitely are not. Some of our clients switched to us because we offer fixed pricing while offering the same performance. So as you can see, those were messages in bold with the elements that I was talking about. All right, so we've built cadences per trigger with their different USPs, and we were testing them, right? So we built the sequences, we added cold calling and LinkedIn touch points, and now my VDRs know exactly who to target with what messaging. And let's see what resonates, what doesn't, which one of the hypotheses is valid. And that's why it's super important that foster and encourage this environment of your sales team give you constant feedback every week, what's working, what's not. When they do objection handling, really understanding if this is an excuse or a real reason, right? And if it's a real reason, that's great feedback for us to change our messaging and our sales and marketing approach. So I'll show you more or less in the next slide what I mean by this. For me, it's important to understand if the trigger is easy to find because it's about productivity, right? So the easier it is to find companies within a certain trigger, the more efficient will be your work. If it's super difficult to find a trigger, we need to think if it's worth investing our time. It might be. I'm not saying it's not, but we need to think if it is or not. And how do we decide that? To know if it's relevant, if it's a priority, because it can be relevant. If it's not a priority, your prospect won't book a meeting with you or buy your product. That those are not the times anymore. And if it's relevant, if it's a priority, can we actually help? Is that something where we are the solution for the problem? And I'll show you how in a second. So as you remember, we have the three triggers: Dora, bare metal service being too rigid, and growth. So let's start with Dora. Is it easy to find? Yes. Basically, if you put geography, Europe, as a filter, and industry, fintech, banking, insurance, all of these companies have to be Dora compliant. So in 2 seconds, you have a list of companies that could be that this trigger is relevant for them. So yes, it is relevant. Legislation is usually relevant, and if it's not a priority, you make one. It starts to be one because you don't want to be uncompliant. You don't want to deal with fines for non-complying. So easy to find, relevant, and priority. Now, what's the catch here? We couldn't help anymore. Why? Because I don't know if you remember, but the companies had to be compliant by January 17th. When I run the interviews was September 2024. When we start doing the outreach was October 2024. Meaning by then, all of the companies or most of the companies already had the compliant cloud. It was too close to the deadline. So even though it's relevant, even though a lot of our customers switched to us because of that, by that point in time, we couldn't help anymore. It was too late. And that's why it's important to test your hypothesis in your real world scenario and encourage your salespeople to understand why they are not interested. And this is a very good reason why. We were too late to the party. All right, bare metal servers. It's not easy to find. You can totally check and do research to understand if the company has a bare metal server, but it's not an automatic list on Sales Navigator with a filter. That's not a filter. It takes time. So you need to think if you want to allocate that time in finding out if you want to build a list with bare metal service. And also because is this a relevant trigger? Maybe yes, maybe not. A bare metal server, so on-prem, is not per se a problem or a challenge. It's only a problem of a challenge if the company needs flexibility and needs to scale up and down, right? So having a bare metal server, it doesn't mean that changing it to a cloud provider is a priority. Might be not. And that's why you need to think if you want to invest your time into prospecting companies with bare metal service. If a company is actually wanting to switch from bare metal on-prem to cloud, then yes, then we can help. We have no vendor lock-in, we have flexibility, we have a fast IO. Then we can make a use case. We are in a good spot to sell to them. But again, maybe not the best use of our time. Growth, easy to find, as we all know. It's a filter in Sales Navigator or any similar tool. So yes, it's not that difficult to find a list of companies that are growing. Usually growth is relevant because you always have to change something when you're growing, whether it's technology or hiring or processes. Usually if you're growing, things change automatically. It should at least. So usually it's relevant and it's usually also a priority. Do I need to hire more people? Do I need to change processes? So it's usually also a priority, changing stuff that comes with the pain of growing. And if your case is cloud, usually companies that are growing, if they are on-prem, they definitely need, or not definitely, but they might need definitely a cloud provider. Or if you have already cloud provider, but your bills are getting too expensive, you might want to switch to one with predictable pricing while maintaining the same scale, stability, and speed that you were happy before. Out of all of the three triggers, the ones that we decided to pursue was growth with the USP of predictable pricing. And that were our results. Why? Because we knew exactly how to allocate our time, energy, and resources in things that would convert. So our activities went up, I'm not kidding, 1000% compared to the quarter before. And again, sales is a numbers game. So if your activities are higher and are meaningful and you're targeting the right people for the right reasons, you also have an increase on meetings, books, and opportunities. Now, I promised I would speak about AI, but so far nothing. And it's not that I forgot, it's because AI is a tool. Okay. So AI doesn't help you if you don't know your fundamentals. AI makes everything more efficient. So if your fundamentals are right, makes you more efficient. If your fundamentals are wrong, the chaos is here. So it amplifies chaos, and we don't want that. So you need to know how to do everything without AI. And once you know how to do it, you can speed it up with AI. And that's exactly how I'm going to show you how to do it. So the whole process that I just described, if we don't use AI at all, you need to interview the customer, which takes 30 minutes. That's with or without AI the same. But you cannot take, or without AI, you cannot really pay much attention, or not the same, because you have to take notes. And then you need to transcribe, read, analyze, and transcripts. I would say at least 2 hours. Then build a buyer persona profile and write the cadence and all of these sequences, at least 2 hours. And I'm being very generous. I would say even more especially if you have less experience. So it's 4 hours and a half for the whole process for one customer and one ICP, right? If you do three customers for the same ICP that you have to analyze the whole conversation and find patterns, that's 13 hours. If you want to do different ICPs, which you probably should because your company might have different ones, then it's a lot of time, right? Now, with AI, everything is faster. So the interview, it's still 30 minutes because you still have to speak to your prospect, but you don't have to write anything. You have AI transcribing the whole conversation. You can analyze the script and finding the results, the challenges, all of the elements that I showed very quickly. A first initial buyer persona profile, it's read in seconds. It doesn't mean that should be the final one, but it's a good sketch to start. In the cadence, I put 30 minutes because I still think that it shouldn't be AI doing that alone. You can use AI to have ideas, to help you organize ideas, but you should still be the one writing or having a final review on your cadence. So suddenly it's just 1 hour. So 1 hour, one customer per vertical, 1 hour, three customers, one vertical or ICP, 3 hours, three customers, three verticals or ICP, 9 hours. So the time you spend doing and accomplishing the same quality result reduces dramatically. And that's exactly what AI is here for. It's not to replace you, it's not to do the job for you, it's that you can do your job much more efficiently. And you can do more stuff in the less amount of time. So same result, less dragging, less sacrifice, let's put this way. So AI tools, there are a lot of transcription tools, TLDV, Gong, Sibyl, you name it. Pick the one that you prefer, also according to the language you speak. Messaging and persona, you can use ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, up to you. Sequencing, I'm a huge fan of Ample Markets, so that's usually the tool we use and has a lot of AI features as well, from power dial to sequences to building lists based on the triggers with the duo, replicating your voice message. So Ample Market is a really sequencing tool that really uses AI the right way. But you can also use the others that we all know, up to you. So, if I want to just say one last thing before I let you go, really, you have to interview your customers, and you have to interview them every year because priorities and challenges change, especially with this economical environment. Things can change overnight, and what was up to date yesterday doesn't mean it is tomorrow. So you should be aware of the triggers out there, of the market environment, but you should really revisit these at least once a year. And then use AI to make your life easier, not to replace you, not to steal your job, but to make your life easier and to get to your results faster. So I hope you like it. And yeah, thank you for listening. Bye bye.